Hey, it's Jackson. In today's video, I'm covering how these families were eaten alive by deadly animals. From a family of 6 who ignored their guide's warnings and set up camp deep inside tiger territory, to a road trip that takes a sudden, catastrophic turn, sending a family plummeting into shark-patrolled waters. It was July 18th, 2025, and the remote waterways of a little-known mangrove delta in eastern India wound through dense forest, forming a maze of tidal channels and small islands. Morning mist clung to exposed roots, the air heavy with humidity and insect noise. The site lay outside any major tourist route, a fringe buffer where tidal channels and soft mud turned every step into a small decision. David Hendricks had spent 3 years saving for a year-long family trip. At 49, he ran a contracting business in Colorado. Maria, his wife, formerly a nurse, now taught their children at home. Their 4 children, Jessica, 19, the twins, Matthew and Michael, both 17, and Emma, 15, had been backpacking through India for 3 weeks, avoiding popular routes. A hired guide had refused to cross a marked buffer zone because of recent tiger activity. David overruled him and chose a low, tree-ringed island where the channels looked like natural barriers. Bengal tigers in mangrove terrain are adapted swimmers and move along tidal corridors. This area had a displaced adult male that recent flooding had pushed outward. He'd been using the islands as movement channels. That evening, the family set 3 tents on the island, ate packaged food, and settled under the low, humid sky. Nothing at camp suggested immediate danger, only a smell on the wind that a large predator might already be nearby. At first light, Emma stepped away from the tents to use a makeshift latrine beneath the trees. The tiger, concealed in dense cover, closed the short distance in an instant and knocked her down with a single rapid strike to the upper torso. The sound of her fall and the brief, high-pitched scream tore the campsite into motion. What followed was not a neat, staged sequence, but a chaotic scramble. Jessica, Matthew, Michael, Maria, and David stumbled out of the tents in different states, some barefoot, some still clutching sleeping bags. In the half-light, movement fanned across ankle-deep mud and a tangle of prop roots, backpacks and tent poles snagged on exposed roots. Several broken roots jutted at waist and chest height, sharp where previous tides had snapped them. Michael's foot slid into soft, suctioning mud and could not be freed at once. Where movement stopped, vulnerability followed. The tiger struck nearest targets first and moved with quick, forceful bursts rather than a choreographed pattern. He hit Jessica as she came out of her tent, a sudden, brutal collision that left her collapsing into the nylon wall. David ran blindly toward the noise, tool in hand, and drew the cat's attention. The animal latched onto David with a crushing bite to the throat that dropped him within seconds. He was motionless when he fell. The single adult male did not pause to scan or methodically pick victims. He reacted to the closest movement in the muddled clearing. Panic drove the others into the mangrove labyrinth. Michael and Maria broke away toward a narrow channel, but the terrain betrayed them. Michael's boots snagged, and he went down hard against a broken prop root. A jagged, half-submerged branch drove into his abdomen as he fell, severing vessels and trapping him awkwardly against the root mass. Maria managed a short distance farther, but collapsed near the waterline, bleeding heavily from deep claw wounds across her flank and upper torso. She dragged herself under low foliage but could not continue. Matthew tried to move toward the boat but lost footing in the soft mud and twisted, the straps of his pack catching on a root. He fought to free himself while the tiger closed again. The animal struck with a decisive, fatal bite to the upper neck. The rapidity of those final strikes left little time for coherent rescue attempts. Anyone who tried to pull a family member free was hampered by suctioning mud, tangled roots, and the need to avoid further movement that would draw the predator back. Within 7 minutes, the clearing had gone from a scattered campsite to a tableau of collapsed tents, scattered gear, and people stopped short by mud or injury. Emma lay near the initial strike site, having died where she fell. Jessica and David were found close to their tents, both fatally injured in the first moments of the attack. Matthew lay a short distance downslope, killed by the decisive neck bite delivered during the second surge. 2 others, Michael and Maria, had managed to put distance between themselves and the tents, but were located a short distance away, collapsed and mortally wounded. Michael had been impaled on a mangrove root during the scramble. Maria had bled heavily from deep lacerations and could not reach help. Coroner findings later confirmed that all 6 family members died from a combination of catastrophic trauma and rapid blood loss, consistent with a single short-duration tiger attack. Rangers closed access to the island and nearby channels for 2 days to document the site and monitor for fresh tiger sign. No man-eater indicators were found, and the animal was not located in follow-up sweeps, so authorities issued a brief advisory to guides about increased tiger movement after recent flooding. It was September 22, 2017, and a cold Pacific fog hung over the river valleys of British Columbia's central coast, where old-growth forest met tidal flats along a remote multi-day hiking trail. The salmon runs were approaching their peak, drawing dense concentrations of grizzly bears to the rivers and streams that fed into the coastal estuaries. The trail was popular among experienced backpackers for its isolation and wildlife viewing opportunities, though its remoteness meant that emergency response times could exceed several hours. Stellan Uvrard was a 32-year-old freelance photographer from Vancouver whose work focused on wilderness landscapes and wildlife. He had hiked extensively across British Columbia's coast and was familiar with grizzly bear protocols. He and his partner, an experienced hiker in her late 20s, had planned a 5-day traverse of the coastal trail, timing their trip to coincide with the salmon run for photographic opportunities. Their preparation was thorough. Food was stored in a bear-resistant canister hung between trees at night. Cooking was conducted at least 100 yards from their sleeping area. The tent was clean, free of food odors, and equipped with a canister of bear spray stored in the vestibule pocket. They carried a satellite emergency beacon. On the 3rd evening, the couple selected a campsite in a meadow clearing approximately 200 yards from the trail. The site appeared ideal, a flat, grassy area with good drainage, sheltered from the coastal wind by a line of Sitka spruce. Running through the center of the meadow was a shallow, well-worn depression, approximately 2 feet wide, packed hard and free of vegetation. They noted it, but interpreted it as a general game trail, common throughout the coastal forest. They pitched their tent several feet from the depression and settled in for the night. The depression was an established bear travel corridor, a route used nightly by bears moving between the interior forest and the salmon streams along the coast. During salmon season, these corridors saw heavy, predictable traffic, particularly in the pre-dawn hours when bears moved toward the rivers ahead of first light. Grizzly bears traveling along established corridors move with purpose, following scent trails and well-worn paths that have been used by generations of bears. When a traveling bear encounters an unexpected obstacle on a familiar route at close range, particularly in low-light conditions, the response is often investigatory, involving sniffing, circling, and physical contact with the object. If the obstacle then produces sudden movement or sound at close range, during this investigation, the bear's response can escalate rapidly from curiosity to defensive aggression. The combination of close proximity, surprise, and an enclosed or obstructed space can produce violent outcomes even from bears that are not otherwise aggressive toward humans. Based on evidence at the scene, investigators determined that a large male grizzly traveling the corridor encountered the tent directly in its path during the pre-dawn hours. Track evidence indicated the bear had circled the tent at least once before making direct contact, pressing against the fabric and collapsing a section of the tent's rain fly. The satellite emergency beacon was activated at 4:17 a.m., providing investigators with a precise timestamp. Evidence suggested that Uvrard, positioned nearest the tent's vestibule, had unzipped the entrance and attempted to exit, placing himself at point-blank range with the bear. The bear's defensive reaction was immediate. The force of the initial contact collapsed the remaining tent structure onto his partner inside. She became entangled in the collapsed fabric, unable to orient, locate the canister, or reach the vestibule exit. The bear spray was found inside the collapsed tent with the safety clip still engaged. Evidence indicated the bear, still agitated by continued movement and sound from within the collapsed structure at its feet, engaged a second time through the fabric. A helicopter response team, dispatched after the beacon activation, reached the site approximately 3 hours later. Both Ouvrard and his partner were found at the campsite. The investigation confirmed the tent had been pitched directly on a documented bear travel corridor and that the bear had encountered it as an unexpected obstacle during routine movement. Investigators noted that all other bear safety protocols had been followed correctly. The report concluded that the tent's placement on the corridor was the singular contributing factor, a mistake that was invisible to the hikers, but that placed them directly in the path of predictable bear traffic during peak activity hours. Hair samples recovered at the scene were used to identify the bear. Wildlife officials subsequently confirmed the animal had a documented history of investigating campsites, damaging unoccupied tents, and obtaining human food along the coastal trail in previous seasons. The bear had been involved in at least 2 prior food conditioning incidents reported to wildlife management, indicating a level of habituation to human camp structures and food association that likely contributed to the escalation from investigation to sustained contact. It was September 23, 2024, and the sprawling Texas landscape of Wildland Safari Ranch stretched endlessly under the blazing afternoon sun. The 5,000-acre property outside San Antonio had been transformed into an authentic African experience, complete with acacia trees, watering holes, and custom-built enclosures housing some of Africa's most magnificent predators. The Martinez family had arrived that morning for their long-awaited anniversary weekend, their excitement palpable as they checked into the luxury safari lodge that promised close encounters with exotic wildlife in a controlled environment. Carlos Martinez, 38, had worked double shifts in construction for months to afford this special trip for his wife, Maria's 35th birthday and their wedding anniversary. Maria, a dedicated elementary school teacher, had dreamed of seeing African lions since childhood, and their children Sophia, 12, and Diego, 9, had been counting down the days since Christmas when Carlos surprised them with the booking. The ranch advertised itself as offering authentic safari experiences with professional guides and state-of-the-art safety protocols. The family had spent the morning on a guided vehicle tour, marveling at zebras, giraffes, and antelope roaming freely across the Texas plains. Their guide, Keel Morris, was a seasoned wildlife expert with 15 years of experience who had worked at legitimate African reserves before joining the ranch staff. As the afternoon tour began, Keel led the Martinez family to the crown jewel of the ranch's attractions, the lion habitat, where 3 African lions lived in a sprawling enclosure designed to mimic the Serengeti. African lions are apex predators that have ruled the African savanna for millennia, with adult males weighing between 400 and 500 pounds and possessing the strength to take down prey much larger than themselves. Male lions are territorial and aggressive, especially when protecting their pride or territory from perceived threats. Their powerful jaws can deliver a bite force exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch, while their razor-sharp claws can grow up to 3 inches long. The family approached the viewing area adjacent to the lion enclosure, where a massive 450-pound male named Simba paced behind reinforced fencing. Keel had positioned them at the designated photo spot when he realized he had forgotten his professional camera equipment. He assured the family he would return in just a moment and instructed them to remain exactly where they were while he retrieved the camera for their anniversary photos. Keel walked back to the vehicle to fetch his camera, but the tour routes at Wildlands stretched farther than guests realized. The vehicle was parked nearly a quarter-mile away, behind a maintenance compound, and Keel had to cross gravel paths and a service gate to reach it. Meanwhile, radio traffic from another sector of the ranch warned of a disabled access gate. Staff scrambled to locate keys and coordinate a response. Ranch protocol also restricted untrained personnel from entering the enclosure area, even in an emergency, meaning the first responders were forced to stage and plan a safe retrieval rather than rush in immediately. Carlos noticed what appeared to be a service gate in the fencing. Warning signs were posted, but he misread them as general cautions rather than prohibitions. The latch hadn't been secured properly after earlier maintenance, and believing it might offer a better angle for photos, he pulled it open. The moment Carlos opened the gate, Simba's predatory instincts exploded into action. The massive lion had been watching the family intently, and the opening triggered his territorial response immediately. The lion's initial impact sent Carlos sprawling backward onto the ground with bone-crushing force. Simba's jaws locked around Carlos's neck, crushing his windpipe and severing arteries in seconds. Carlos's body convulsed as the lion shook him violently, the force snapping vertebrae and leaving catastrophic trauma. Maria's screams pierced the air as she grabbed Sofia and Diego, trying desperately to shield them from the horrific scene unfolding before them. But Simba's attack was far from over. After releasing Carlos's lifeless body, the lion turned his attention to the rest of the family, his predatory instincts driving him to eliminate all perceived threats to his territory. Simba's second charge targeted Maria, who was attempting to push her children toward the tour vehicle. The lion's massive paw struck her in the back with sledgehammer force, sending her tumbling forward as his claws raked across her spine and shoulders. Maria's desperate attempts to crawl away only triggered Simba's hunting instincts further, and his jaws found her neck within seconds. Sofia and Diego tried to run toward the distant tour vehicle, but their small legs were no match for Simba's speed and agility. The lion caught Sofia first, his powerful jaws crushing her small frame instantly before turning to pursue Diego, who had made it only 20 yards before Simba's final attack ended the massacre. Keel returned with his camera equipment and froze at the horrific scene. Simba paced around the lifeless bodies while the viewing area fell into chaos. Shaking, Keel grabbed his emergency radio and called for help. Within minutes, ranch staff and armed responders converged on the enclosure, but by then, the scene was devastatingly still. Witnesses later described the attack as a series of savage bursts separated by tense moments when the lion guarded the bodies and paced the enclosure. Despite rapid action once help arrived, the combination of Keel's distance, the compound's layout, and the ranch's own safety protocols meant staff could not intervene faster. The 7-minute window, investigators concluded, was a product of those delays, not because the animal fought continuously without pause, but because help took precious time to reach the family and secure the enclosure. The state investigation found multiple failures that compounded the tragedy. A service latch left unfastened after maintenance, understaffed shifts, unclear emergency procedures for immediate enclosure breaches, and an access design that delayed response. Regulators described the incident as a catastrophic breakdown of both maintenance and emergency planning. Within days, the ranch's operating license was suspended pending a full review. Within a week, the facility announced permanent closure as lawsuits and public outcry mounted. The Martinez family's deaths prompted statewide inspections of similar facilities and a renewed push for stricter rules on predator enclosures, staffing minimums, and emergency access protocols. It was July 18, 2017, when the Vancy family arrived at a private savanna reserve in East Africa, cameras ready and expectations high. Grover Vancy, a 41-year-old travel vlogger known for pushing boundaries to capture risky wildlife footage, had planned the trip for months. His wife Marla, 39, was a lifestyle influencer documenting every moment online. Their 3 children, Caspian, 14, Jetta, 11, and Bodhi, 8, were used to their parents' content-driven lifestyle. The reserve stretched endlessly around them, golden grass swaying beneath a harsh sun, acacia trees dotting the horizon. Grover chose this location for closer vehicle access to wildlife than most parks, though rangers warned that exiting vehicles near predators and flying drones were forbidden. That morning, their guide radioed that another safari vehicle ahead was stuck and drove forward to assist just beyond the rise. After confirming by radio that no predators had been reported nearby, he instructed the Vancies to remain inside with doors closed and said he would return shortly. Moments after the guide's vehicle slipped out of sight, Grover dismissed the rules as overly cautious. He stepped out beside the parked vehicle, laughing into the camera that lions usually ignored. Vehicles and tourists exaggerated the danger. Marla hesitated but followed. Caspian quietly launched the banned drone, sending it buzzing overhead. Jetta hovered near the open door, eager to spot animals, while Bodhi mimicked his siblings, trying to seem brave. African lions are apex predators and among the continent's most efficient hunters. Females do most of the hunting, working together to bring down prey larger than themselves. Lions often rest in the heat, but remain alert to opportunity. When disturbed, or when movement appears nearby, instinct can override their lethargy with explosive speed. The fatal mistake came when the Vancy family edged farther from their vehicle. After spotting shapes in the tall grass, Grover urged them around the front for a better shot, where the high grass partly blocked their view. They moved several steps out, focused on framing wildlife behind them. Above, the drone dipped lower, its whine slicing through the stillness and agitating the concealed pride. One lioness lifted her head. Another rose and moved low through the grass, nearly invisible. The family stayed focused on their cameras. Jetta had wandered furthest, crouching to adjust her angle when the first lioness burst from cover and crossed the short distance in seconds. She slammed into the 11-year-old, knocking her flat. Dust exploded as the lioness grappled, biting into Jetta's shoulder and face before shifting to the throat. Grover shouted and rushed forward, but the sudden movement triggered more predatory focus. As Jetta's attack unfolded, a second lioness charged at Grover, striking his side and sending him stumbling. He tried to retreat, but she seized his shoulder and dragged him down. He fought briefly before she repositioned and locked onto his neck, crushing tissue as he weakened within seconds. Marla screamed and grabbed Bodhi, pulling him toward the vehicle in blind terror. For a moment, they seemed close enough to reach it. The commotion drew a large male lion resting only meters deeper in the grass. He rose, fixed on the frantic movement, and lunged as Marla stumbled. His weight slammed into them, knocking both down. The male bit Marla first as she tried to shield Bodhi. When the child suddenly crawled free and cried out, the movement triggered the lion to strike again, pinning Bodhi and biting into his torso. Caspian, frozen at first, finally bolted for the vehicle, adrenaline carrying him several strides before he tripped on uneven ground. He scrambled up, hands slipping in the dust. But another lioness, already circling behind the grass line, rushed in. She grabbed, briefly lost hold, then seized him higher at the neck. A violent shake followed, leaving him motionless in the dust. The chaos lasted less than a minute. First the strike on Jetta, then Grover's failed charge, followed by desperate attempts to flee. After several tense seconds scanning the area, the lions began dragging the bodies into taller grass, pausing to reposition their grips as they pulled them away from the abandoned vehicle and scattered equipment. Death came through airway crushing, catastrophic trauma, and blood loss. Overhead, the drone continued circling until its battery died. Reserve staff initiated a search after repeated unanswered radio calls, and the guide's delayed return raised concern. They discovered the scene later that day, once the unattended vehicle was located. The investigation confirmed the family had violated safety protocols by leaving their vehicle without authorization and flying a prohibited drone near a resting pride. Footage recovered showed how quickly the situation escalated once the lions were disturbed. The reserve later tightened supervision and penalties for leaving vehicles in predator zones. It was July 15, 2016, in the Bahamas. The sun hung high over the Atlantic. Beyond the reef's edge, the water shifted from clear blue to a darker, deeper hue that signaled open ocean. The Schultz family's snorkeling excursion, meant to be a highlight of their trip, would end in silence and horror, leaving only fragments of what had happened behind. Anna Schultz was 18, freshly graduated from secondary school in Hamburg, preparing to begin university courses in the fall. She was adventurous but cautious, known by friends for being practical in her choices. Her sister Marie, 20, was more confident in the water, a regular at local swim clubs, and had encouraged the family to try snorkeling in the Bahamas while on holiday. Their parents booked a tour boat to take them out, seeing it as safe enough, especially with a local guide present. Neither girl was reckless. They trusted the crew's reassurance that it was a standard outing. For Anna, the trip was partly about bonding with Marie before her sister began her own studies abroad. The sisters had grown close during their travels, often pairing off while their parents lingered on deck. Their goal that day was simple: explore the reef drop-off, photograph the fish with an underwater camera, and return with stories. It was a reasonable plan, one shared by many tourists each year, and neither of them had reason to think it held unusual risk. The boat, though modest, looked capable. The weather was calm. Their parents waited on board, watching as the girls swam ahead. The reef was vivid, full of darting parrotfish, schools of tang, and soft coral bending with the current. Beyond it, the ocean floor disappeared into deep blue void, a sharp contrast to the bright shallows. The sisters swam about 40 yards from the boat, their fins cutting smooth arcs in the water, unaware that scraps tossed overboard earlier in the day had drifted into the current. This quiet habit of some crews, meant to draw fish closer for tourists, also attracted predators that followed scent trails far across the open sea. Oceanic white-tip sharks are among the most persistent hunters in pelagic waters. They thrive in open expanses and can grow beyond 10 feet in length and weigh more than 400 pounds. Historically feared for scavenging wrecks and ship disasters, they show little hesitation in approaching humans. Their feeding behavior is deliberate, often circling, bumping, and closing in when food is present. They rely on curiosity and boldness, sometimes staying near boats for extended periods once attracted by blood or scraps. There had been warnings. Another operator had radioed earlier that morning about aggressive shark activity near the reef edge, suggesting crews keep tourists closer to the boat. Some of the Schultz family's own group noticed shadows moving below, but the guide dismissed them as harmless reef sharks. The sisters, more focused on their exploration, noticed the occasional shift in fish behavior, but did not view it as danger. When their mother called out for them to stay nearer, they waved and kept swimming. Moments later, 2 oceanic white tips appeared from deeper water. Their fins broke the surface briefly before sliding under again, circling with lazy but purposeful arcs. Passengers on the boat noticed first, pointing and shouting for the sisters to return. The guide whistled sharply, urging them in. Anna and Marie turned back, but they were already 40 yards out, their fins moving slower than the circling predators. The first strike came suddenly. Witnesses described one shark lunging upward, its jaws closing across Anna's arm and chest in a violent thrash. She screamed, the sound carrying over water. Blood spread rapidly, startling fish away in bursts of color. Marie reached for her, trying to push her toward the boat, but the second shark struck her leg from below, twisting her in a sharp spin. The water around them churned with foam, their cries mixing with the shouts from deck. Anna was pulled sideways, dragged under before resurfacing briefly, limp, her arm hanging uselessly. Marie kicked frantically, but the shark's grip tore deeper, shaking her with bursts of force. The sea turned red in patches, breaking the turquoise with spreading clouds. Crew members tried throwing buoys and poles, but the distance was too great. Their parents screamed from the railing, restrained by others as the scene unfolded beyond reach. For several long moments, both sisters disappeared beneath the surface, dragged down by circling sharks. The water frothed and boiled with movement before settling. Then Anna surfaced once more, face pale, body motionless, drifting for only seconds before being pulled down again. The sharks lingered, their fins cutting the surface in slow arcs until finally disappearing into deeper water. Silence followed, broken only by the sobs of family. Authorities arrived hours later, responding to the guide's distress call. Search efforts turned up no remains, only a drifting snorkel and fragments of a fin strap. The family returned to shore empty-handed. Their vacation ended in grief. Bahamian officials issued a short warning, urging tourists to avoid unregulated snorkeling trips and acknowledging that baiting practices had likely contributed to the incident. In Hamburg, weeks later, fewer than 40 people attended a memorial service. Friends and relatives spoke briefly, the absence of the sisters marked by photographs placed on a small table at the front. In the months that followed, Bahamian maritime authorities introduced tighter licensing requirements for tour operators, banning the disposal of food scraps near tourist snorkeling grounds. It was June 4th, 2014, at a popular but unguarded swimming area in a remote national park in northern Australia. The river flowed wide and brown between rocky banks lined with tropical palms and paperbark trees. Tide markers on nearby rocks showed the water, level dropping toward low tide. Ethan was 26, a backpacker from Canada working seasonal construction jobs to fund Extended. Travel throughout Australia's remote wilderness areas and coastal regions. Ruby was 24, his girlfriend from England who worked in hospitality at various tourist locations including beach, resorts, and adventure tour companies. Both were experienced swimmers and outdoor enthusiasts completing a 6-month tour of northern Australia's national parks and wildlife reserves, based on observations of other tourists swimming in the area over previous days, they believed. Daytime swimming was relatively safe if proper precautions were followed and emergency equipment was readily available. Ethan had completed lifeguard training 3 years earlier at a community college and felt confident in his water rescue abilities and swimming endurance. Ruby grew up swimming in ocean conditions along England's coast and had extensive experience with tidal waters, strong currents, and cold water conditions that had prepared her for challenging aquatic environments. Local guides had mentioned increased predator activity during recent months due to territorial disputes between large males during breeding season, creating unusually aggressive behavior patterns. Park authorities had recorded 3 separate confirmed sightings within the previous week at this specific location, indicating regular use by at least one large individual. Fresh slide marks on the muddy bank showed where a large reptile had recently entered the water, leaving impressions 6 feet wide and several inches deep in the soft mud. The marks showed regular use over several days, indicating an established basking site and prime hunting area. Claw marks on fallen logs extended 4 feet above the current waterline, suggesting an animal of considerable size and strength, capable of climbing over substantial obstacles. The large saltwater reptile averages 17 to 23 feet in length and weighs up to 2,200 pounds. When fully mature, with males growing significantly larger than females and establishing territories they defend aggressively. These predators are perfect ambush hunters, capable of remaining completely motionless underwater for up to 60 minutes while stalking potential prey, with incredible patience. They possess incredible bite force, measuring 3,700 pounds per square inch, the strongest bite force of any living animal, capable of crushing large bones and penetrating thick materials instantly. These predators typically perform a death roll to disorient and incapacitate prey, spinning rapidly, while maintaining their crushing grip to cause massive internal injuries. After incapacitating their prey, they begin feeding immediately on accessible tissue. They can accelerate to 25 miles per hour in water and launch themselves completely out of water when attacking prey near the shoreline. At a swimming hole 50 feet from the main river crossing point, where water depth reached 8 feet, Ethan and Ruby entered the water during peak predator activity time, when these reptiles hunt most actively. The 18-foot male had been lying motionless in murky water 20 feet from shore, having established this location as a preferred hunting area over several months. Ethan swam toward deeper water to test current strength, while Ruby followed more cautiously, staying closer to shore initially. The 1,800-pound predator had detected their movement and scent from 100 feet away, but remained completely motionless while they approached his territory. The massive reptile exploded from below when Ethan reached the 6-foot depth mark, launching his entire body upward with incredible force. Massive jaws clamped around Ethan's torso just below his ribcage, with teeth penetrating through his body and causing immediate trauma to internal organs. Ruby screamed and attempted to reach Ethan as the predator dragged him toward deeper water. The death roll began within seconds, spinning Ethan underwater while maintaining its crushing grip. The violent rotation caused massive internal injuries and loss of consciousness. Ruby dove underwater, attempting to help, but the massive territorial male, now fully committed to defending his hunting ground, seized her as she approached. The crocodile's powerful jaws crushed her chest and arms, causing severe trauma and rapid blood loss. The predator dragged both victims to deeper water, where they drowned from their injuries and submersion. Following typical behavior, the crocodile stored the bodies in submerged vegetation along the riverbank. Emergency services required 45 minutes to reach the remote location due to difficult terrain access. Wildlife management teams secured the area before recovery. Operations could begin safely, locating the predator 150 feet downstream. When rescue teams arrived, they recovered both victims from the underwater storage site. The deaths were ruled accidental due to swimming in known predator habitat, despite posted warnings. It was September 20th, 2017, on the rural outskirts of Taita Taveta County, Kenya. The late afternoon sun hung low over the horizon, staining the sky in muted shades of orange and gold. A dry wind moved through the acacia scrub, carrying with it the faint scent of dust and vegetation baked under months of relentless heat. Joseph Muli, 42, walked at the front of his family. A tall, broad-shouldered man, he was a subsistence farmer who had lived his entire life in the shadow of Tsavo National Park. Years of tending crops and livestock had made him wary but confident in the bush. Behind him walked his wife, Miriam, 39, carrying a woven basket of maize and cassava. Their 2 children, Daniel, 14, and Ruth, 11, trailed close, balancing small bundles of supplies brought from a relative's home. They'd walked this 2-mile track countless times. Familiarity dulled caution, and despite the area's wildlife crossings, Joseph believed real danger stayed deeper in the park. He had heard talk in the village that a lion had been spotted nearby a few days earlier, but it was the dry season. Livestock and waterholes were the focus of most predators' movements, not people walking in daylight. The warning was filed away, acknowledged, but dismissed. The path wound through thorny acacia and tall grass, cicadas droning under hornbill calls, the thick scrub hiding more than the goats or hares that usually stirred it. What the Muleys likely didn't fully appreciate was the apex predator that ruled these lands. Lions in Tsavo were formidable creatures, with adult males typically weighing 350 to 500 pounds and possessing muscular bodies capable of short bursts of speed up to 35 miles per hour. Their bite force, approaching 650 pounds per square inch, could crush the windpipe or spine of prey within seconds. While they typically hunted at night, injured or desperate lions sometimes took greater risks, targeting slower-moving animals in daylight. A large male with a slight limp had been reported near the village by herders earlier that week. Rangers believed it had sustained injuries to its hindquarters, possibly from a territorial fight. A predator unable to chase its normal prey often turned to whatever it could catch, and humans on foot were slower than antelope. Passing a dry gully where brush thickened, Miriam spotted paw prints the size of dinner plates, but stayed silent. A faint cough came from within, masked by the wind as they neared halfway home. A distant herder later recalled a deep growl before the lion burst from the thicket, closing the gap with startling speed despite its limp. It hit Joseph hard, forelimbs locking around him as ribs cracked and claws scraped bone. Miriam screamed and turned to pull her children back, but the movement triggered the lion's predatory focus. It released Joseph and lunged for her, jaws clamping onto her neck with enough pressure to silence her in seconds. Daniel tried to run, his sandals skidding in the dust, but the lion's paw hooked his leg and dragged him off balance. The claws tore through fabric and flesh, and he was pulled beneath the animal's body. Ruth's cry carried across the scrub before it was abruptly cut short. The lion's attacks were methodical: bite, pin, release, using sheer strength and precision to subdue each victim. The air was thick with the smell of blood and dust, the dry grass thrashing under the predator's weight. The entire assault lasted less than 5 minutes, brutal and efficient. From his vantage point 100 yards away, the herder froze, his voice catching in his throat as he took in the scene. The lion's tail flicked in agitation as it moved from one body to the next, ensuring none could rise again. By the time the first shouts rang out from approaching villagers, the lion stood over the still forms, chest heaving, muzzle darkened. The shouts grew louder, accompanied by the thud of running feet and the crack of sticks striking together. The lion backed away, pausing only once to glare at the intruders before disappearing into the scrub. Villagers surrounded the scene, the dust still hanging in the air. Joseph's body lay face down, one arm bent at an unnatural angle. Miriam's basket was overturned, maize spilling into the dirt. Daniel's sandal was several feet from where he lay, and Ruth's small bundle of supplies was torn open. The herder who had first seen the attack ran back toward the main road, shouting for help. He reached a group of men near the village water pump, and one of them used a mobile phone to call local authorities. It took just under an hour for wildlife rangers and police to arrive, their truck bouncing over the rough track toward the site. Rangers followed the tracks into the bush and identified the prints as belonging to the injured male. For 2 days, the search continued. The lion was eventually located resting in a shaded hollow, showing no signs of retreat when approached. It was shot on sight, a decision made quickly to prevent further attacks. Examination revealed deep scars along its flank and hip, confirming the earlier reports of injury. The Mooley family's funeral was held the next morning in the village square. Simple wooden coffins were laid side by side, surrounded by relatives and neighbors. The service was quiet, the only voices those of the elders reciting prayers. Local newspapers carried a small notice about the incident. There was no national coverage. In the days following, villagers avoided the path entirely, forcing them to take a longer route to the fields. The place where the attack occurred became overgrown, the silence there heavier than before. It was June 22, 2016, and the Chobe River in Botswana flowed lazily through one of Africa's most spectacular wildlife corridors. The riverbanks were crowded with elephants, buffalo, and countless other species drawn to the permanent water source during the dry season. Melissa and Trevor Ashford had been married for exactly 9 days, having chosen an African safari as their honeymoon destination. Both 29 years old, the couple had met 3 years earlier while working at the same advertising agency in London. Trevor was a graphic designer with an adventurous spirit, while Melissa worked in account management. They had booked a guided canoe safari along the Chobe River, an increasingly popular activity that allowed tourists to experience wildlife from water level. Their guide, Kabo Moeti, was a veteran river guide with 12 years of experience navigating the Chobe's waters and the dangerous animals that inhabited them. During the morning safety briefing, Kabo had been explicit about the rules: remain seated at all times, keep voices low, never put hands in the water, maintain distance from hippos and crocodiles, and most importantly, follow all instructions immediately without question. Nile crocodiles are among Africa's most dangerous predators, capable of taking prey as large as wildebeest and occasionally humans. Adult males can reach lengths of over 16 feet and weigh more than 1,000 pounds. These reptiles are ambush predators with incredible patience, often remaining motionless for hours before exploding into action. Their bite force exceeds 3,000 pounds per square inch, the strongest of any living animal. Crocodiles are particularly dangerous near riverbanks, where they bask in the sun and they can launch themselves from the water with shocking speed when prey comes within range. The morning had been spectacular. The couple had paddled past elephants drinking at the water's edge, watched hippos yawning in the shallows, and photographed countless birds. By early afternoon, Trevor had become increasingly bold, leaning over the canoe's edge for better camera angles, despite Kabo's repeated warnings to stay centered. They rounded a bend in the river, and Kabo immediately began back-paddling, instructing the couple to remain absolutely still. On the muddy bank ahead, a massive Nile crocodile basked in the afternoon sun. The reptile was enormous, easily 14 feet long, with scarred armor plating that indicated an old and successful predator. Kabo began steering the canoe to give the crocodile a wide berth, explaining in a low voice that they needed to maintain at least 20 meters distance. Trevor wanted a close-up photograph of the crocodile, the kind of dramatic image that would dominate his social media feed. He argued with Kabo, insisting that the crocodile was clearly asleep and posed no danger. When Kabo refused to paddle closer, Trevor made a decision that would prove fatal. Despite Kabo's sharp warning to remain seated, Trevor stood up in the canoe to get a better angle for his photograph. The moment Trevor rose to his feet, the canoe's stability shifted dramatically. Melissa instinctively grabbed for Trevor's arm to pull him back down, but her sudden movement combined with Trevor's standing position created a catastrophic imbalance. The canoe rocked violently to one side. Trevor lost his balance and fell sideways, his weight pulling the canoe over. Melissa tumbled out the opposite side as the canoe capsized, dumping both of them into the chest-deep water, approximately 12 meters from the basking crocodile. Kabo managed to stay with the overturning canoe and immediately began shouting for the couple to swim toward him. He grabbed the capsized canoe and tried to right it, while radioing emergency coordinates with his waterproof radio. The moment Trevor and Melissa hit the water, the crocodile's eyes snapped open. The massive reptile launched itself from the bank with explosive speed, its powerful tail propelling its enormous body through the water in seconds. Trevor was closest to the crocodile and thrashing in panic, creating vibrations and splashing that attracted the predator's attention. The reptile's jaws clamped onto Trevor's torso, the 3,000-pound bite force crushing his ribcage instantly. Trevor's scream was cut short as the crocodile began its death roll, a hunting technique where the reptile spins rapidly to disorient prey and drown it. Trevor's body spun violently in the churning water, disappearing beneath the surface within seconds. Melissa had surfaced several meters away and was swimming desperately toward Kabo, her strokes frantic but hampered by her life jacket and the current. Kabo had managed to partially right the canoe and extended his paddle toward her, shouting for her to grab it. Melissa's fingers were inches from the paddle when she suddenly jerked backward and screamed. The same crocodile, having released Trevor's lifeless body, had turned its attention to the continued splashing and movement. The reptile surged through the water and clamped its jaws around Melissa's lower body. Kabo grabbed Melissa's outstretched hand and tried to pull her toward the canoe, but the crocodile's grip was absolute. The reptile began pulling backward, its immense strength easily overpowering Kabo's desperate efforts. Melissa's grip on Kabo's hand slipped as the crocodile dragged her away from the canoe. The reptile executed another death roll, and Melissa's body disappeared beneath the blood-stained water. Cabo continued shouting and paddling toward where Melissa had gone under, but neither she nor Trevor resurfaced. The entire sequence from capsize to the final attack had lasted approximately 90 seconds. A motorized patrol boat from the Chobe National Park headquarters arrived within 8 minutes of Cabo's first emergency call. The Rangers found Cabo clinging to his partially capsized canoe, still scanning the water for any sign of the couple. The Rangers pulled Cabo into their boat and immediately began a search pattern, using poles to probe the murky water while maintaining vigilant watch for crocodiles. They spotted Trevor's body floating face down approximately 30 meters from the attack site within 15 minutes. Trevor had sustained massive trauma to his torso and had clearly died within moments of the initial attack. Melissa's body was not immediately visible, and the increasing number of crocodiles in the area made continued searching extremely dangerous. After 2 hours of intensive searching, with no sign of Melissa and with darkness approaching, authorities made the difficult decision to suspend the search until first light. The following morning, a larger search team located Melissa's body in the reeds along the opposite bank, approximately 100 meters from where she had been taken. The investigation determined that Trevor's decision to stand up in the canoe had directly caused the capsize, and that both deaths resulted entirely from tourist error rather than guide negligence. Cabo was cleared of any wrongdoing, though he was deeply traumatized by witnessing the attacks and his inability to save either tourist. The deaths of Melissa and Trevor Ashford devastated their families and sent shockwaves through the safari tourism industry. Chobe River operators implemented additional safety measures, including stricter enforcement of the no-standing rule. The incident served as a grim reminder that Africa's waterways are among the continent's most dangerous environments. It was August 14, 2016, and the golden grasslands of Serengeti National Park stretched endlessly under the blazing Tanzanian sun. The vast savanna, dotted with acacia trees and teeming with wildlife, represented the culmination of a dream vacation for the Walsh family from Ohio. After years of saving and planning, Jennifer Walsh, her husband Tom, and their 8-year-old daughter Emma had finally made it to Africa for the safari adventure of a lifetime. At 34, Jennifer was an elementary school teacher who had always been passionate about wildlife and conservation. She had spent months researching their trip, reading about African animals, and teaching Emma about the incredible creatures they would encounter. Jennifer's love for education extended to her travels. She saw every experience as a learning opportunity and had been documenting their safari with photos and videos to share with her students back home. That morning, Tom had decided to join a walking safari with armed guides, while Jennifer and Emma opted for a game drive in an open safari vehicle with their local guide, Moses. The plan was simple: spend the morning photographing wildlife, return to the lodge for lunch, and then prepare for their evening flight back to the United States. African lions are apex predators that live in social groups called prides, typically consisting of related females, their cubs, and one or more dominant males. Adult males can weigh up to 420 pounds and are capable of taking down prey much larger than themselves, including buffalo and young elephants. Lions are ambush hunters that rely on teamwork and coordination to bring down their victims. They can run up to 50 miles per hour in short bursts and possess powerful jaws capable of delivering a bite force exceeding 650 pounds per square inch. Most importantly, lions view humans as potential prey, especially when people are isolated and vulnerable in open terrain. The game drive had been proceeding normally when their vehicle experienced mechanical problems about 10 miles from the lodge. Moses, their experienced guide, immediately radioed for assistance and instructed Jennifer and Emma to remain with the vehicle while he attempted repairs. In the distance, Jennifer could see what appeared to be buildings that she assumed were part of their lodge complex. Growing impatient after waiting for over an hour in the heat, Jennifer made the fateful decision that would cost both her and Emma their lives. Despite Moses's urgent warnings to stay with the vehicle, she convinced herself that the walk to the lodge would be safe during daylight hours. She gathered their water bottles and camera equipment, took Emma by the hand, and began walking across the open savanna. What Jennifer didn't realize was that a pride of 6 lions had been tracking the scent of the tourists for the past hour. As Jennifer and Emma walked across the open grassland, they were moving directly into the path of the approaching predators. The attack attack came without warning as Jennifer and Emma crossed a shallow depression in the grassland. The Pride had positioned themselves in the tall grass on either side of the natural pathway, using their superior knowledge of the terrain to set up a perfect ambush. The two male lions struck first, launching themselves at Jennifer with explosive force, while the females moved to surround Emma. The larger male, weighing over 400 pounds, slammed into Jennifer's back with bone-crushing impact, his massive claws raking across her shoulders and neck as he drove her to the ground. Jennifer's scream echoed across the savannah as the lion's powerful jaws clamped down on the back of her neck, his 4-inch canine teeth puncturing through muscle and vertebrae. The second male joined the attack immediately, his claws tearing into Jennifer's torso, while his jaws found purchase on her arm. Emma's terrified screams joined her mother's as the three lionesses surrounded her with predatory precision. The coordinated attack was swift and brutal, with each lioness taking a different angle of approach to prevent any possibility of escape. The largest female knocked Emma to the ground with a powerful swipe of her paw, while the other two moved in to deliver the killing bites. Jennifer's struggles grew weaker as the two males continued their assault, their combined weight and strength overwhelming any resistance she could offer. The larger male's grip on her neck severed major arteries and damaged her spinal cord, causing massive blood loss and paralysis. The attack on Emma was equally swift and merciless. The lionesses worked with the efficiency of experienced hunters, their powerful jaws and razor-sharp claws making quick work of their small victim. Emma's cries were cut short as the largest female's bite crushed her skull, while the other lionesses inflicted fatal wounds to her torso and limbs. Within minutes, both Jennifer and Emma had succumbed to their injuries, their bodies lying motionless on the blood-soaked grass while the Pride began the process of feeding. Moses had heard the screams and immediately radioed for emergency assistance while attempting to reach the attack site on foot. However, the distance and his need to avoid the lion pride meant that help arrived far too late. Park rangers and lodge security reached the scene nearly 2 hours after the attack, finding only scattered remains and evidence of the lion's feeding behavior. The investigation revealed that Jennifer had made multiple critical errors, including leaving the safety of the vehicle, walking in open terrain during peak hunting hours, and failing to recognize the signs of lion activity in the area. Tom Walsh was devastated by the loss of his wife and daughter, struggling to understand how their dream vacation had turned into an unimaginable tragedy. It was August 23rd, 2017, in the remote wilderness 15 miles from a small Arctic settlement. The tundra stretched endlessly under 24-hour daylight with patches of sea, ice floating in the nearby fjord. The landscape showed no trees, only low shrubs and rocky outcrops scattered with bleached animal bones. Wind patterns carried scents across vast distances in the thin Arctic air. Caleb was 28, unemployed since a workplace back injury ended his construction career 18. Months earlier, when he fell from scaffolding and herniated 3 lumbar discs, chronic pain from the injury limited his physical activities and prevented him from returning to manual labor despite extensive physical therapy. Astrid was 26, a climate change researcher pursuing her doctoral degree, whose research grant income supported them both while Caleb attended vocational rehabilitation programs and pain management therapy. Both were experienced campers with over 50 nights of backcountry experience in various environments including mountain wilderness areas, though this represented their first Arctic expedition. Astrid planned this 3-day research expedition to document ice melt patterns and collect water samples for climate analysis, contributing to her doctoral thesis. Safety briefings specifically warned against leaving food or scented items outside tents, explaining that Arctic predators could detect these odors from extreme distances in the dry air. Recent tracks were spotted 2 miles from their campsite, measuring 12 inches across with distinct claw marks indicating a large adult male. Radio reports from other research teams mentioned a thin adult male in the area, likely hungry due to reduced hunting opportunities, caused by unusual ice conditions that limited access to normal prey. The tracks showed an irregular gait suggesting possible injury or weakness, making the animal potentially more dangerous and unpredictable around humans. Emergency protocols required checking in every 12 hours via satellite radio, with automatic search and rescue activation if contact was missed. Local weather patterns could change rapidly, creating whiteout conditions that grounded aircraft for days and made rescue operations impossible. The area had experienced unusual warming trends that disrupted normal prey. Animal migration patterns, forcing predators to seek alternative food sources, including human. Camps and equipment. The large white Arctic predator averages 800 to 1,500 pounds when fully grown, with males, significantly larger than females. These animals can smell food from 20 miles away and have no natural fear of humans, viewing people as potential prey when other food sources become scarce. Starving individuals become increasingly aggressive and willing to attack human camps. Their powerful jaws exert 1,200 pounds of pressure per square inch, capable of crushing large bones. They can swim for miles in frigid water and run up to 25 miles per hour on land despite their massive size. The attack began at their orange dome tent positioned 200 yards from fjord shoreline in an area that provided wind protection and flat terrain for equipment setup. Caleb and Astrid left a cooking pot with fish residue and scented toiletries outside the tent, despite specific training. Warnings about odor management in Arctic environments. At 2 a.m., during continuous daylight conditions, the 900-pound male approached their campsite, drawn by food scents that had traveled on wind currents. Caleb unzipped tent door to investigate without grabbing emergency flare or bear deterrent. Spray, both stored within arm's reach. The 900-pound male stood 15 feet away, drawn by food. Scents that had traveled on wind currents. His thin condition was visible through patchy fur that indicated nutritional stress and prolonged hunger. Astrid screamed as Caleb scrambled backward into the tent while the predator charged, immediately covering the distance in seconds. Massive paws knocked Caleb down as teeth penetrated his chest cavity through winter clothing and protective layers. The animal's weight crushed his ribs and compressed his lungs. Astrid crawled toward emergency equipment, but the animal's massive body blocked the tent entrance. As the predator turned toward her, its weight crushed her spine between shoulder blades. The predator began consuming accessible tissue, while both victims died from blood loss and organ damage over several minutes. They failed to make scheduled radio check-in 12 hours later, automatically triggering emergency response protocols. Rescue helicopter required 6 hours to reach the remote location due to weather conditions and fuel logistics. When rescue teams arrived, they found both victims had died from massive blood loss and organ damage caused by the predator attack. Recovery team found scattered camping equipment and food containers that had attracted the animal. The deaths were ruled accidental due to failure to follow mandatory Arctic safety protocols. It was March 15, 2016, and the rugged coastline of Port Campbell stretched along Victoria's treacherous Great Ocean Road, where winding clifftop highways carved through limestone formations above the churning Southern Ocean. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the narrow roadway as dense sea mist began rolling inland from the turbulent waters below. David Wilson, a 41-year-old insurance adjuster from Melbourne, gripped the steering wheel tightly as he navigated the notorious stretch of road with his family packed into their sedan for what was supposed to be a relaxing weekend getaway. His wife Sarah sat in the passenger seat, occasionally glancing nervously at the steep drop-offs that appeared and disappeared through gaps in the coastal vegetation. Their 2 children, 8-year-old Emma and 12-year-old Connor, occupied the back seat, both absorbed in their electronic devices as the scenic drive continued along one of Australia's most dangerous highways. David had driven this route several several times before during business trips, but never with his entire family aboard. The Wilson family had been looking forward to this trip for months, planning to explore the famous 12 Apostles rock formations and stay at a coastal resort near Lorne. David's demanding work schedule had kept him away from home frequently, and this weekend represented a rare opportunity for quality family time. The Great Ocean Road's reputation for spectacular scenery came with an equally notorious history of tragic accidents, particularly along the sections where the highway hugged the cliff faces above the ocean. The weather conditions that afternoon were particularly treacherous, with intermittent rain showers creating slick patches on the limestone-based roadway. Local authorities had issued warnings about reduced visibility and dangerous driving conditions, but many tourists continued to navigate the scenic route despite the hazards. The combination of narrow lanes, inadequate shoulder space, and the constant threat of oncoming traffic made even experienced drivers nervous on this stretch of highway. There had been several close calls during their journey, but David's confidence in his driving abilities and their tight schedule convinced him to continue. The family's excitement about reaching their destination overshadowed the growing concerns about the deteriorating weather and road conditions. The family's peaceful journey took a deadly turn when Connor dropped his gaming device between the seats and began frantically searching for it in the narrow space behind his father's seat. David made the fatal decision to assist his son while maintaining his speed through a particularly challenging section of the coastal highway. Taking his eyes off the treacherous road for what seemed like only a moment, David reached back to help Connor locate the device while simultaneously trying to navigate a sharp curve that appeared suddenly through the thickening mist. The combination of reduced visibility, wet road conditions, and his momentary inattention proved catastrophic as the vehicle's front wheels crossed the center line just as an oncoming truck appeared around the bend. David yanked the steering wheel hard to the right to avoid the collision, but overcorrected on the slippery surface, sending the sedan careening toward the cliff edge at dangerous speed. The vehicle smashed through the inadequate safety barrier with tremendous force, the metal guardrail offering little resistance as the family car became airborne over the 70-foot drop to the rocky coastline below. The sedan plummeted through the misty air for several terrifying seconds before striking a jagged rock formation that jutted from the cliff face approximately 40 feet above the churning ocean. The violent impact crumpled the vehicle's roof and shattered every window, sending glass fragments throughout the passenger compartment. The collision's tremendous force ejected Sarah through the destroyed windshield, her body tumbling through the air toward the turbulent waters below, while her family remained trapped in the mangled wreckage. Sarah's unconscious form struck the ocean surface with devastating impact, the force likely causing fatal injuries before the cold southern ocean waters could claim her. Her body was immediately swept into the turbulent currents, where water temperatures barely above 50 degrees and powerful undertows ensured that survival was impossible, even for an uninjured swimmer. Great white sharks are the Southern Ocean's apex predators, capable of reaching lengths of 20 feet and possessing one of the most powerful bite forces in the animal kingdom. These solitary hunters frequently patrol coastal waters and are particularly dangerous due to their opportunistic feeding behavior and incredible speed. While sightings of large sharks are rare off Victoria's coast, they are not impossible, particularly near seal colonies along the rocky shoreline. The cold waters and unpredictable conditions make these areas inherently dangerous for any human who enters them. The twisted metal holding the Wilson family's vehicle gave way almost immediately under the tremendous weight and structural damage. The sedan plummeted toward the churning waters below, spinning end over end before crashing into the ocean with a tremendous splash that sent spray high into the air. The vehicle's remaining windows exploded from the impact as seawater began rushing into the passenger compartment. David and his children, already critically injured from the initial cliff impact, had no chance of survival as the freezing southern ocean water flooded their lungs and the vehicle sank rapidly toward the rocky bottom 40 feet below. The combination of massive trauma, hypothermia, and drowning claimed their lives within minutes of entering the water. Marine rescue teams arrived within an hour of receiving reports about the crash, but found only an empty section of highway where the safety barrier had been destroyed and tire marks leading to the cliff edge. Extensive underwater search operations involving divers and sonar equipment located the submerged vehicle 3 days later. Recovery efforts revealed evidence that marine scavengers had been active in the area, a grim reminder of the ocean's ocean's unforgiving nature and the predators that patrol these dangerous waters. The investigation into the Wilson family tragedy revealed that this particular section of the Great Ocean Road had been the site of numerous accidents over the years, with inadequate safety barriers and poor visibility contributing to multiple fatalities. Local residents had petitioned for improved infrastructure for decades, but budget constraints and the challenging terrain had delayed necessary upgrades. The Wilson crash became a catalyst for renewed safety initiatives, though the improvements would come too late for this family and others who had perished on this notorious stretch of highway. It was July 18, 2016, in a remote restricted forest valley deep within the mountainous wilderness of southeastern Alaska. The area was a maze of dense spruce and alder thickets, crossed by cold glacial streams and narrow animal trails, where the ecosystem thrived in rugged isolation. Towering conifers stretched overhead, their branches forming a shadowed canopy that filtered the fading sunlight into dim green gloom. The salmon-rich river cutting through the valley created the perfect feeding ground for one of North America's most formidable predators. Warning signs had been posted along the access trail, clearly marking the zone as off-limits during peak salmon run season. But these barriers meant little to those seeking adventure beyond boundaries. Veda Spall and her twin sister Leda, both 19 years old, had arrived in Alaska on a budget backpacking trip, eager to capture experiences that would set their social media apart. Veda was a photography student with a reputation for documenting forbidden locations, always pushing limits to get shots others would not dare attempt. Leda, studying hospitality, followed her sister's lead, documenting their travels for her growing online following. Traveling with them was Marco Ilyan, a 20-year-old environmental science student who had repeatedly warned the twins about the dangers of restricted wildlife feeding zones. The group had learned about the closed valley from a local shuttle driver who mentioned the seasonal bear concentration area in passing. Rather than deterring them, the restriction intrigued Veda, who saw it as an opportunity for rare wildlife photography. They hired an inexperienced freelance guide, willing to bypass the regulations for extra payment, agreeing to take them inside as the sun began its descent. The guide mentioned casually that campers in nearby areas had reported aggressive bear activity over recent weeks. Marco protested, explaining that bears feeding on salmon were highly territorial and easily provoked, but the twins insisted, promising they would remain on the open gravel bars and keep their distance from the tree line. As dusk approached, the three moved along the riverbank, boots crunching softly on wet stones. Veda walked ahead of the group, camera held ready at chest height, trying to capture the reflections of the forest in the slow-moving water. The fading light created an eerie stillness, and the only sounds were the river's steady rush and the occasional splash of salmon breaking the surface. Grizzly bears are among the largest land predators in North America, with adult males weighing up to 700 pounds or more. They possess immense muscular strength and can sprint at speeds exceeding 35 miles per hour over short distances. Their claws, often 4 inches long, are built for digging and tearing, while their bite force is powerful enough to crush bone. During salmon season, bears enter a hyper-focused feeding state, defending prime fishing territory aggressively and reacting instantly to perceived intrusions. The fatal mistake occurred when Veda stepped closer to a cluster of fallen logs near the river's bend, unaware that a large grizzly bear had been feeding on a salmon carcass just beyond the brush. The bear, estimated at over 8 feet tall when standing, had detected the group's scent and movement from the moment they entered the gravel bar. In a sudden, explosive charge, it burst from the alder thicket, covering the distance in seconds. Before Veda could react, the bear struck her with a sweeping forelimb, the force knocking her violently onto the stones as its claws tore deep into her left thigh and hip. The bear immediately followed with a crushing bite to her upper leg, its jaws clamping down with immense pressure. Teeth punctured through muscle and into the femur, the impact fracturing the bone and severing major blood vessels. Veda screamed as the bear dragged her several feet toward the brush, the ground scraping against her back while blood spread rapidly across the stones. Leda instinctively rushed forward toward her sister, shouting and stumbling across the uneven riverbank. As she closed the distance, the sudden movement triggered the bear's defensive response. It released Veda momentarily and wheeled toward Leda, rising partially onto its hind legs before dropping forward with overwhelming force. The bear slammed into her torso, knocking her flat as its claws raked across her chest and shoulder, tearing through fabric and flesh. A powerful bite followed, clamping around her ribcage. The pressure fractured multiple ribs, some driven inward toward the lungs. The bear's attack remained fast and chaotic, driven by territorial aggression rather than predatory stalking. It bit and shook Leda violently, widening the wounds and causing catastrophic internal injuries. Her attempts to crawl away weakened within seconds as severe trauma and shock overtook her. Meanwhile, Veda, immobilized by the shattered femur and massive blood loss, struggled to breathe as she tried to pull herself across the stones. The earlier bite had severed the femoral artery, and rapid hemorrhaging induced hypovolemic shock. Her vision blurred as the sounds of the river dulled. Within moments, she lost consciousness from the combined effects of blood loss and trauma. The bear, still agitated, returned briefly to Veda, delivering another crushing bite and several paw strikes before retreating back toward the riverbank and disappearing into the thick brush, leaving the area silent except for the rushing water. Marco and the guide fled up the trail immediately, unable to intervene safely. They contacted emergency services from a ranger station several miles away. Recovery teams entered the restricted valley the following morning under armed wildlife supervision due to continued bear activity. The bodies of both sisters were located near the river bend, where the attack had occurred. An investigation by Alaska wildlife authorities confirmed that the twins had entered a clearly marked seasonal bear restriction zone during peak salmon feeding weeks. The freelance guide was cited for operating without proper authorization and violating wildlife safety regulations. The twins' family later released a statement expressing their devastation and urging travelers to respect wildlife boundaries and posted warnings. The tragedy prompted renewed emphasis on enforcing seasonal closures in high-density bear habitats. It was October 12, 2018, in an unfenced section of a major African ecosystem, 25 miles from the nearest ranger station. The golden grassland stretched endlessly under clear, blue sky, dotted with scattered acacia trees and rocky outcrops. The severe drought had lasted 8 months, turning green plains into brittle yellow stubble. Animal carcasses lay scattered across the landscape where herbivores had succumbed to starvation. Nolan was 35, an elementary school teacher who taught 4th grade mathematics and reading. At an inner-city school with limited resources and challenging student populations, Zara was 33, also teaching at the same institution where they had met 5 years earlier during New Teacher Orientation Week. Both dedicated their careers to education despite low salaries, long hours, and increasingly difficult working conditions in underfunded schools. They were devoted parents to 8-year-old twins, Emma and John, who stayed with Zara's parents during their anniversary trip to ensure the children maintained their school schedule. The couple had saved for 4 years to afford this dream 10th anniversary trip carefully, budgeting every expense and working extra summer jobs to accumulate the necessary funds for flights, accommodations, and safari costs. They specifically chose an ethical conservation safari operator that supported local wildlife protection efforts and community development programs, aligning with their environmental values. Both had taken vacation time from their teaching jobs to ensure they could fully enjoy their once-in-a-lifetime adventure. Licensed safari guide had 15 years of experience in the region and held all required certifications for operating in unfenced wilderness areas where dangerous wildlife roamed freely. His vehicle was equipped with radio communication systems, emergency medical supplies, and predator deterrent devices, including air horns and flares. Radio chatter between safari guides throughout the region reported highly unusual predator behavior as groups grew increasingly desperate for food, with traditional prey populations. Decimated by the extreme drought conditions, recent vehicle breakdown protocols specifically required all passengers to remain inside vehicles until rescue arrived due to dramatically increased encounter risks with starving and aggressive wildlife. Carcass counts throughout the ecosystem showed unprecedented mortality rates among zebras, antelope, and other herbivores that normally provided abundant prey for predator populations. The large tawny cats normally average 265 to 420 pounds and live in complex social groups of 10 to 30 individuals with established hierarchical structures and cooperative hunting strategies. During severe drought conditions, they become increasingly desperate and willing to take extreme risks for any available food source, including attacking prey much larger than their normal hunting capabilities. Starvation drives them to modify their natural behavior patterns dramatically, including increased aggression toward humans and willingness to approach vehicles and camps. When multiple predators feed together during times of extreme hunger, they typically incapacitate prey completely before beginning consumption, though desperation can alter normal behavioral patterns. Group hunting dynamics allow them to overwhelm larger prey through coordinated attacks, though human encounters usually involve confusion and opportunistic behavior rather than calculated military-style precision. Bite force measures 650 pounds per square inch, sufficient to crush bones and cause massive trauma when multiple animals attack. Everything went wrong in open grassland 200 yards from the nearest acacia tree, where their vehicle suffered complete mechanical failure due to radiator problems exacerbated by extreme heat and dust conditions clogging the cooling system. After radioing for assistance and receiving confirmation that backup would arrive within 45 minutes, engine coolant loss required immediate external repair work that couldn't be completed from inside the vehicle. Too large. Predators had been resting in nearby shade when the vehicle's breakdown attracted their attention through scent and mechanical sounds. As Nolan worked under the vehicle's hood with basic repair tools while Zara monitored radio communications from the passenger seat, she spotted movement in the grass 80 feet away at 8:15 a.m. She called a warning when she realized two large predators were slowly approaching. Through the sparse cover, testing and circling their position. The animals showed typical stalking behavior, moving closer in stages while assessing the threat. The lead female began a cautious approach as Nolan attempted to reach the vehicle, but his sudden movement triggered her predatory instincts. As he stumbled over the repair tools and fell 30 feet from the vehicle, the female committed to her charge. The second predator moved too. Flank as Nolan scrambled desperately toward safety, but couldn't cover the distance in time. Nolan was brought down as he reached for the vehicle door handle, with the female delivering a crushing bite to his back and neck. Zara screamed and attempted to start the engine, but the mechanical failure prevented any escape. The second predator approached the driver's side, cautiously testing the opening before attacking through the partially open door as she tried to close it, seizing her arm and dragging her from the vehicle. Both victims suffered fatal injuries from powerful jaws targeting vital areas. The predators' desperation drove them to overcome their natural wariness of humans and vehicles, though they still showed hesitation before committing to the final attacks. Following their natural instincts, the animals incapacitated both victims completely before beginning to feed. Guide attempted radio contact at scheduled check-in time, but received no response, triggering automatic search and rescue protocols established for vehicle breakdowns in remote areas. A. Rescue vehicle located the site after a 90-minute search through difficult terrain, finding the predator group had scattered when ranger vehicles approached with sirens and air horns. When rescue teams arrived, they found both victims had died from massive trauma and blood, loss caused by the predator attack. The recovery team found the couple's anniversary gifts still wrapped in the vehicle, along with photos from earlier in their trip. The deaths were ruled accidental due to vehicle breakdown in unfenced wilderness during extreme drought conditions. That had altered normal wildlife behavior patterns. It was June 6, 2025, off Monterey Bay, California. The Pacific was calm beneath a fading sun, kelp beds swaying just below the surface. From a distance, the small luxury yacht gleamed, anchored in still water. By nightfall, the weekend trip would end not with laughter, but with violence from below. Mark Hollister, 46, was a real estate developer from San Jose. Known for his confidence and habit of taking risks in business, he carried the same attitude into leisure. He often rented high-end boats for family outings, priding himself on giving his wife and children experiences he never had growing up. Mark was comfortable at sea, but not deeply experienced with its hazards. To him, the ocean was a backdrop for luxury rather than a place of danger. His wife, Dana, 43, worked part-time at a design studio and spent most of her energy raising their two children, Ethan and Claire. Ethan, 12, was eager to fish and had begged to use chum to attract something big. Claire, 9, preferred staying near her mother, anxious but excited to be on the water. The family had come to Monterey Bay for a weekend escape, a chance to celebrate the start of summer. Their decisions, chumming, leaning close to the rail, dismissing a shark sighting, seemed harmless in the moment, understandable for a family seeking adventure, yet they would prove catastrophic. The yacht sat near a kelp forest, where dark fronds rose toward the surface. The ocean appeared glassy, but beneath it stretched a world of hidden movement. Great white sharks lurk these waters. In Monterey Bay, they can reach lengths of 18 feet, weighing over 2,000 pounds. They are apex predators with a bite force strong enough to crush bone. Typically, they feed on seals along the kelp beds, striking with sudden bursts of speed. Attacks on boats are rare but not unheard of, usually triggered when chum or fishing activity draws them in. While a great white's primary instinct is not to harass humans, confusion or agitation can lead to destructive behavior. Earlier in the day, the family had tossed leftover bait into the water, laughing as gulls swooped and fish scattered. Mark brushed off warnings that chumming so close to the yacht might draw larger predators. When the shark appeared near sunset, circling with deliberate passes, Dana urged caution, but Mark treated it as spectacle. Witnesses later described the family smiling and pointing as the animal's dorsal fin cut the surface. Even when the shark struck the hull once, rocking the yacht and rattling the railing, Mark dismissed it as curiosity. The children leaned over the deck, watching. But then, the shark's behavior escalated. From the charter boat anchored nearby, several people saw the animal ram the starboard side with startling force, its bulk thudding against fiberglass and steel. Each impact bent the railing further until a section gave way. Ethan, standing nearest, lost his footing and toppled into the water with a splash. Dana's scream carried across the water as she reached for him. What happened next unfolded in seconds, but was burned into the accounts of those who watched. The shark breached upward, its mouth clamping around Ethan's torso. Blood clouded the water as the boy was pulled under. Mark dove in instinctively, arms striking through the red churn, but the predator circled back. With a sudden lunge from below, it struck him hard, shearing off his leg at the thigh. He surfaced briefly, thrashing, before being dragged down in silence. On deck, Claire clutched her mother's waist, sobbing as the yacht rocked with another collision. The force pitched Dana over the broken railing into the sea. The shark turned on her within moments, its jaws closing around her side. Witnesses recalled her cry cut short as the animal dragged her down. Claire, left alone on the blood-soaked deck, screamed for her parents until another strike slammed against the yacht, nearly toppling her as well. Those on the charter boat shouted but could not intervene. Then the shark surged again, striking the hull broadside. Claire lost her grip, tumbling into the water where the predator closed the distance almost instantly. She disappeared beneath the surface in a froth of red. The yacht remained afloat but scarred, its side railings twisted and wood splintered from repeated impacts. The Coast Guard arrived within 20 minutes after frantic radio calls from the nearby charter. They boarded the yacht to find no one alive, only scattered shoes, a child's towel, and streaks of blood along the deck. In the water, they recovered fragments of clothing, a sandal, and pieces of fiberglass where the shark had struck. Divers searched, but found nothing further. The family of 4 was declared lost at sea. Back in San Jose, a memorial was held quietly the following week. Friends and relatives gathered in a church, the service brief and subdued. Authorities did not pursue the shark, noting that great whites in California waters have been protected since 1994, and that identifying the individual animal responsible would be impossible. Instead, patrols and monitoring were increased in the area, with advisories issued to boaters and divers. It was July 8, 2016, and the Sockeye Salmon Run was approaching its peak along a remote river system on the southern coast of Alaska. Tens of thousands of fish choked the shallow spawning channels, their dark red bodies visible from the air as they pushed upstream through water barely deep enough to cover their backs. The run drew dense concentrations of brown bears to the river corridor. The system was among the highest density coastal bear watersheds in the state, comparable to the major salmon rivers of the Katmai and Chignik regions, with wildlife officials estimating over 30 individual bears working a 12-mile stretch of river during the peak weeks. The bears maintained spacing through established hierarchies, dominant males claiming the most productive fishing sites, while subordinate animals, sows with cubs, and subadults worked the margins. Gareth Tolverson was a 44-year-old insurance adjuster from Boise, Idaho, who had planned the fishing trip as a family vacation. Tolverson was an enthusiastic recreational angler who had fished rivers across Idaho and Montana, but had never visited Alaska and had no experience in high-density bear country. He had organized the trip independently, booking a remote fly-in cabin through an online listing without arranging a local guide. His wife and their 2 teenage children accompanied him. The family had arrived at the riverside cabin 2 days earlier, and Tolverson had spent the first day fishing a section of river within sight of the structure. Bears were visible upstream and downstream, a sight the family found thrilling rather than alarming. Tolverson had not purchased bear spray, did not carry bear-resistant food containers, and had received no formal briefing on bear safety protocols. The cabin's owner had included a printed sheet of basic guidelines with the rental materials, but investigators later noted it had been found unopened among the family's belongings. On the morning of July 8th, Tolverson led his family approximately 1 mile downstream to a wide gravel bar where he had spotted a productive-looking pool the previous day. The gravel bar extended roughly 300 yards along the river, bordered on the inland side by dense willow thickets rising 6 to 8 feet high, and on the riverside by braided channels of shallow, cold glacial water. The bar was a natural travel corridor for bears moving between fishing sites, and fresh tracks were visible across the gravel. Tolverson set up the family's gear on the gravel bar and began fishing. Over the next 2 hours, he cleaned several sockeye on the gravel, leaving the gut piles and carcass waste on the rocks approximately 30 feet from where the family had spread their belongings. In established bear country, fish waste left on a gravel bar functions as a powerful attractant, drawing bears from considerable distances downwind. Grizzly bears along Alaskan salmon rivers are among the largest concentrations of brown bears on Earth, with dominant males in coastal populations commonly exceeding 800 pounds during the peak of the salmon run. While salmon abundance generally reduces competition-driven aggression, the sheer density of bears along productive rivers dramatically increases the probability of close-range encounters with humans. A bear approaching an undefended food source on a gravel bar will typically not retreat from shouting or arm waving, particularly if it has learned through repeated experience that human presence near fish remains does not pose a genuine threat. At close range, a grizzly can cover 40 yards in less than 3 seconds. Without bear spray or other deterrents, a person caught in the open on a gravel bar has virtually no means of discouraging an approach or surviving an attack. Based on scene reconstruction by wildlife investigators, a large adult male approached along the gravel bar from downstream at approximately 11:15 a.m., drawn by the scent of the fish waste. Tolverson reportedly attempted to discourage the bear by shouting and waving, a response that might deter a wary bear, but that had no effect on this animal. The bear continued its approach without hesitation, closing the distance to Tolverson at the fish cleaning site. The attack was rapid, and Tolverson sustained fatal injuries on the gravel bar near the gut pile. The remaining family members fled in separate directions across the difficult terrain. Evidence recovered over the following 2 days, including track patterns, blood distribution, and the positions where each individual was found, allowed investigators to reconstruct a probable sequence of events. Evidence suggested that Tolverson's wife, running through the dense willow thickets along the inland edge of the gravel bar, rounded a bend in a narrow game trail and encountered a sow grizzly with 2 cubs at close range. Track and physical evidence indicated a short, explosive defensive engagement consistent with a surprise encounter near cubs. The sow and cubs departed the area afterward. One of the 2 teenagers, disoriented and separated from the others by the braided river channels and dense willow, fled along the river's edge before emerging back onto the gravel bar. Evidence suggested the adult male had never fully left the fish waste area following the initial encounter and was still feeding when the teenager stumbled into close proximity. The bear's response was consistent with ongoing food defense behavior rather than a separate engagement. The 4th family member was found by investigators in a shallow braided channel approximately a quarter mile from the gravel bar. The cause of death was determined to be consistent with hypothermia and drowning. Investigators concluded that this individual, injured during the initial panic from a fall on the uneven river cobble, had collapsed in the cold glacial water and been unable to self-rescue. There was no evidence of bear contact. A separate fishing party camped approximately 2 miles upstream, heard distant sounds carried by the river valley, and activated a satellite phone to alert authorities. A recovery operation reached the gravel bar by helicopter later that afternoon. Investigators documented the scene over the following 2 days, noting the fish waste left on the gravel, the absence of bear spray or deterrents among the family's gear, and the unopened bear safety guidelines recovered from the cabin. The wildlife investigation concluded that a chain of compounding failures had produced the outcome: the absence of a local guide, the failure to carry or use bear deterrents, the improper disposal of fish waste on an active bear travel corridor, and the decision to establish a prolonged presence on a gravel bar during peak bear density had each individually increased risk. Together, they had dramatically increased the probability of a fatal encounter on a river where the margin for error was already razor thin. It was March 15, 2016. In the buffer zone outside a national park in northern India. The dense forest stretched beyond official boundaries, where villages bordered protected habitat. Morning mist hung between trees as illegal logging paths crisscrossed through. Areas marked with faded warning signs. Fresh tracks from the previous night's hunting covered the forest floor. Owen was 34. A software engineer from the capital who worked 60-hour weeks developing mobile applications for a tech startup. Kavitha was 29, his wife of 6 months working in digital marketing for an advertising agency. They were newlyweds celebrating their delayed honeymoon after postponing their trip twice due to demanding work schedules and project deadlines. Kavitha was 11 weeks pregnant with their first child, confirmed by her doctor just 2 weeks earlier. They had hired an unlicensed local guide to take them into restricted areas for authentic photos that other tourists couldn't access through legal channels. Neither Owen nor Kavitha had wilderness experience beyond city park visits, and one previous camping trip to a developed recreational area with bathroom facilities and marked trails. Owen carried a professional camera system, including telephoto lenses and specialized wildlife photography equipment. Kavitha documented their adventure with her smartphone, planning to create a photo album for their unborn child. The guide warned them to stay quiet and follow exactly behind him, explaining that noise carried far in the forest environment and could attract unwanted attention. Local villagers had reported a female with 2 cubs using this territory for the past month, with sightings increasing in frequency as the animals established new den sites. The guide emphasized the importance of maintaining distance and avoiding sudden movements that could trigger defensive behavior. The guide pointed out claw marks on tree bark 8 feet above ground level, indicating recent territorial marking behavior by a large adult. Paw prints in soft mud showed the animal had passed through within the previous 24 hours. Bird calls and monkey alarm sounds indicated predator presence in the immediate area, creating an acoustic warning system that experienced locals understood, but tourists often ignored. Female tigers typically weigh 220 to 350 pounds when fully grown, with males reaching 400 to 570 pounds. These predators can leap 30 feet horizontally and reach 35 miles per hour in short bursts. Females with cubs will attack any perceived threat that approaches too closely to their offspring. They typically bite the neck or throat to kill prey, then drag carcasses to secluded feeding areas. Their powerful jaws can crush bone and sever major blood vessels within seconds. Deep in a thicket, 400 yards off the main trail, Owen and Kavitha walked ahead of their guide, while he examined paw prints in soft mud, discussing camera settings and photo composition. Loudly enough to be heard 100 feet away, they approached within 50 feet of hidden cubs, without knowledge of their presence. The female emerged silently from bamboo undergrowth 30 feet away, having detected their voices from her concealed position. The 280-pound predator covered the distance in 3 powerful bounds, each leap spanning 15 feet across uneven terrain. Initial impact knocked Owen backward as massive jaws clamped on. His left shoulder and claws raked across his torso. The force drove him into thorny undergrowth, where branches tore his clothing and skin. Kavitha screamed and ran towards the main trail, but tripped over fallen branches after covering only 20 feet. The cat maintained her grip on Owen for several seconds before releasing him as he lost consciousness from blood loss and trauma. Owen's injuries included crushed ribs, severe claw wounds across his chest and arms, and damage to major blood vessels. As Kavitha attempted to regain her footing, the predator attacked from behind, powerful jaws crushing her ribcage and puncturing both lungs. She lost consciousness within moments from massive internal injuries. The guide reached the village after 45 minutes of running along forest paths and contacted authorities, who required 2 hours to locate the remote attack site. Forest officials and medical personnel arrived with tranquilizer equipment to secure the area. When authorities reached the location, they found both victims had died from massive blood loss and organ damage caused by the predator's attack. The deaths were ruled accidental due to illegal entry into protected wildlife habitat and failure to follow safety guidelines. It was August 14th, 2015, and the sprawling wilderness of a private game reserve near Hoedspruit, South Africa, stretched endlessly under the afternoon sun. The landscape was a patchwork of golden grasslands and scattered acacia trees, with distant mountains creating a dramatic backdrop for one of Africa's most pristine wildlife sanctuaries. Robert Hutchinson navigated his rented Toyota Land Cruiser along the dusty track, his wife Karen in the passenger seat, while their two children, 14-year-old Emma and 12-year-old Dylan, pressed their faces against the back windows. The Hutchinson family had arrived from suburban Connecticut 3 days earlier, fulfilling Robert's lifelong dream of experiencing an African safari. At 41, Robert worked as a marketing executive for a pharmaceutical company, a demanding career that left little time for the adventure he craved. This trip represented years of saving and planning, and Robert was determined to capture every moment on his expensive new camera. The private reserve allowed self-drive safaris, giving visitors freedom to explore while following strict safety guidelines. During orientation, the reserve manager had been explicit. Stay on designated roads, keep windows mostly closed, never turn off your engine near predators, and maintain at least 50 meters distance from lions. After 2 days of peaceful wildlife viewing, Robert had begun seeing these warnings as overly cautious suggestions rather than life-saving protocols. This particular afternoon, the Hutchinsons had been following a pride of lions for nearly an hour. 3 adult females, 2 adolescent males, and 4 cubs tumbled and played near a watering hole. Other vehicles had come and gone, maintaining proper distance, but Robert wanted more. He wanted the photograph that would make his colleagues jealous, the image that would prove he had experienced something extraordinary. African lions are apex predators living in complex social structures called prides, typically consisting of related females, their offspring, and a coalition of males. Adult females do most of the hunting and are fiercely protective of their cubs, viewing any potential threat with immediate aggression. Lions can sprint at speeds up to 50 miles per hour in short bursts and possess bite forces exceeding 600 pounds per square inch. Despite their familiarity with safari vehicles, lions remain wild predators with unpredictable behavior, especially when they perceive threats to their young or territory. Robert steered the Land Cruiser off the designated track, driving across virgin grassland to position closer to the pride. He maneuvered to within 20 meters of the lions, far closer than safety protocols allowed. Robert rolled down his window completely, extending his camera outside for an unobstructed shot. Karen opened her window halfway, caught up in the excitement. The lionesses rose from their resting positions, their body language shifting from relaxed to alert. Their ears swiveled forward, focusing on the vehicle, and their tails began to twitch in a warning pattern. Robert fired off a rapid series of shots, the camera's shutter clicking loudly. One female took several steps toward the vehicle, her head lowered and her eyes fixed on the open windows. Robert finally recognized the danger and decided they needed to leave immediately. He shifted into reverse, but the Land Cruiser's rear wheels spun uselessly. The soft ground near the watering hole, saturated from recent rains and animal traffic, had turned into deceptive mud beneath the dry surface crust. The more Robert accelerated, the deeper the rear wheels sank. The grinding of spinning tires and the revving engine created a harsh mechanical noise that echoed across the grassland. The lionesses interpreted the sound and the vehicle's lurching movements as aggressive behavior. Karen suggested they call for help on the radio, but Robert was convinced he could free the vehicle himself. He opened his door and stepped out to assess the situation, ignoring Karen's protests. The moment his feet touched the ground, the lead lioness charged. She covered the 20 meters in less than 3 seconds, her powerful body moving with terrifying speed across the grassland. Robert tried to scramble back into the vehicle, but the lioness reached him before he could pull his legs inside. Her jaws clamped onto his thigh, her 4-inch canine teeth penetrating deep into the muscle. Robert screamed and grabbed the doorframe, trying to pull himself up, but the lioness's weight dragged him back down. She shook her head violently, and Robert's grip on the doorframe failed. Karen screamed and lunged across the center console, trying to grab Robert's arms and pull him back inside. The lioness maintained her grip on Robert's leg and began dragging him away from the vehicle. A second lioness, emboldened by the first's attack, approached the driver's side. She reared up and thrust her head through the open door, her front paws on the driver's seat. Karen released Robert and tried to scramble back to the passenger side, but the lioness's claws raked across her back and shoulders. Dylan grabbed the radio handset and pressed the emergency button, screaming for help. His panicked voice transmitted across the reserve's emergency frequency. Emma pulled her brother away from the front seats, and both children huddled in the rear cargo area. The first lioness had dragged Robert approximately 10 meters from the vehicle. Her jaws released his leg and clamped onto his throat, crushing his trachea and severing the carotid artery. Robert's struggles weakened rapidly as blood loss and oxygen deprivation took effect. The second lioness pulled Karen halfway out of the driver's door, her powerful jaws closing on Karen's neck. Karen's body went limp within seconds. The attack had lasted approximately 2 minutes when a reserve ranger vehicle appeared on a nearby ridge. The ranger had been conducting a routine patrol when Dylan's emergency transmission came through. He immediately drove toward the GPS coordinates while radioing for backup and firing his rifle into the air. The sharp cracks of gunfire echoed across the grassland. The two lionesses released their victims and backed away from the vehicle, startled by the unfamiliar sound. The ranger reached the Land Cruiser within 90 seconds of firing the warning shots. He found Emma and Dylan traumatized but physically unharmed in the back of the vehicle. Robert and Karen lay motionless on the ground near the driver's side. The ranger immediately called for medical evacuation while checking for vital signs. Robert had already succumbed to his injuries, his throat wound catastrophic. Karen had a faint pulse, but her neck injuries were severe. The ranger applied pressure to her wounds and tried to stabilize her, but she lost consciousness and died before the medical helicopter arrived 12 minutes later. Additional rangers arrived and secured the scene while the children were evacuated. Emma and Dylan were airlifted to a hospital in Johannesburg for treatment of shock. The investigation revealed that Robert had violated multiple safety protocols, most critically exiting the vehicle in the presence of lions. The tragedy devastated the extended Hutchinson family back in Connecticut and sent shockwaves through the safari tourism industry. The reserve implemented additional safety measures, including mandatory GPS tracking with automatic alerts when vehicles left designated roads. The lions involved were not euthanized, as wildlife authorities determined the incident resulted entirely from human error. It was March 22, 2017, and the golden grasslands of Kenya's Masai Mara stretched endlessly under the setting sun, creating the perfect romantic backdrop for newlyweds Sarah and Mark Mitchell. The couple had chosen the famous reserve for their honeymoon, staying at a luxury tented camp that offered stunning views of the annual wildebeest migration. Sarah, a 28-year-old veterinary student from England, had been fascinated by African wildlife since childhood, and saw their honeymoon as an opportunity to observe the animals she had studied in textbooks. Sarah's academic background had given her confidence around animals that perhaps exceeded her practical experience with dangerous African wildlife. She had spent 3 years studying animal behavior and had written her thesis on predator-prey relationships in African ecosystems. Her knowledge of hyena social structures and hunting patterns had made her particularly interested in observing these misunderstood predators in their natural habitat. The couple had been told by camp staff that short walks in the immediate vicinity of their accommodation were generally safe during daylight hours, provided they stayed within designated areas and remained alert for wildlife. However, as the sun began to set on their third day, Sarah convinced Mark to venture beyond the recommended boundaries for what she promised would be a brief romantic stroll. Spotted hyenas are among Africa's most successful predators, living in complex social groups called clans that can number up to 80 individuals. Adult females are larger than males, weighing up to 140 pounds, and possess one of the strongest bite forces in the animal kingdom, capable of crushing bones that other predators cannot break. Hyenas are highly intelligent, cooperative hunters that use sophisticated communication and coordination to bring down prey much larger than themselves. They are also opportunistic scavengers that will aggressively defend food sources hyenas against any perceived competition, including humans. As Sarah and Mark walked hand in hand through the tall grass, they encountered the distinctive whooping calls of hyenas in the distance. Sarah's excitement overcame her caution as she recognized the sounds of a feeding clan, and she convinced Mark to investigate, despite his obvious reluctance. They followed the sounds for nearly half a mile, moving steadily away from the safety of their camp. The clan of 8 spotted hyenas was feeding on a zebra carcass when Sarah and Mark approached their position. The hyenas had been feeding for several hours and were in a heightened state of aggression, protective of their kill and suspicious of any potential competitors. Sarah approached to within 30 feet of the feeding clan, ignoring Mark's increasingly urgent warnings to maintain their distance. She was fascinated by the opportunity to observe hyena social dynamics firsthand and believed her understanding of their behavior would keep her safe. The attack began when the clan's dominant female, a 130-pound matriarch, decided that Sarah posed a threat to their food source. The massive hyena charged across the distance between them with surprising speed, her powerful jaws already open and ready to deliver a bone-crushing bite. The rest of the clan followed immediately, surrounding Sarah in a coordinated attack that demonstrated their sophisticated hunting abilities. The matriarch's initial bite caught Sarah in the thigh, her powerful jaws clamping down with over 1,000 pounds of pressure per square inch. The bone-crushing force instantly fractured Sarah's femur while severing major arteries and causing massive blood loss. Sarah's scream echoed across the savannah as she fell to the ground, her leg unable to support her weight with the shattered bone. The other clan members joined the attack immediately, their powerful jaws and razor-sharp teeth finding purchase on Sarah's arms, torso, and remaining leg. Hyenas are designed to consume every part of their prey, including bones, and their teeth and jaws are perfectly adapted for tearing flesh and crushing skeletal structures. Sarah's struggles grew weaker as multiple hyenas continued their assault, each bite causing additional trauma and blood loss. Mark watched in horror from a distance, too terrified to intervene effectively against 8 powerful predators. Sarah's screams gradually weakened and then stopped as massive blood loss and trauma overwhelmed her system. The hyena clan continued feeding on Sarah's body for nearly 20 minutes before the sound of approaching vehicles caused them to retreat into the bush. Camp security had heard Mark's desperate radio calls for help and arrived with armed guards, but they were far too late to save Sarah's life. The investigation revealed that Sarah and Mark had violated camp safety protocols by leaving designated areas and approaching dangerous wildlife without proper supervision. The hyena clan was monitored but not relocated, as they had acted according to their natural protective instincts around a food source. It was September 8, 2015, at a private game reserve 40 miles outside a major national park in South Africa. The acacia woodland bordered a seasonal waterhole that had shrunk to a muddy depression during the dry season. Game trails converged at this critical water source where animals gathered each evening. Darkness fell quickly at 6:30 p.m. as the last safari vehicles returned to the main lodge 2 miles away. Blake was 31, a bank teller who processed loan applications and managed customer accounts for a regional branch in a small farming community. Nomsa was 28. His wife, who worked as a dental hygienist at a family practice in the same town where they had lived their entire lives. Both were amateur bird watchers who had saved for years to afford this safari vacation. Their first international trip together after years of careful budgeting and overtime work. Blake owned binoculars and field guides, while Nomsa kept detailed journals of their wildlife observations. They had visited 3 other nature reserves, building an impressive list of bird species they hoped to document for a local birding society back home. Lodge curfew was established at 6 p.m. due to increased predator activity near the waterhole. As animals gathered for evening drinking sessions, the reserve manager mentioned an injured adult with an infected paw wound recently spotted limping near the water source during daylight, hours over the previous week. The infection had been visible for over a week, causing the animal to favor easier hunting opportunities due to reduced mobility and hunting effectiveness. The large spotted cat averages 60 to 200 pounds when fully grown, with males typically larger and more muscular than females, but both sexes equally dangerous when threatened or hunting. These predators can leap 20 feet horizontally from a standstill and are excellent climbers, capable of carrying prey up vertical tree trunks to avoid competition from other predators. Injured individuals often target easier prey when unable to hunt their normal diet of small antelope, birds, and rodents that require speed and agility to capture. They possess exceptional night vision, approximately 6 times better than human vision, allowing effective hunting during dawn and dusk hours when most prey animals are active at water sources. These predators typically drag prey up trees, but will begin feeding immediately if threatened or extremely hungry. Their bite force measures 200 pounds per square inch, specifically designed to crush vertebrae and cause rapid incapacitation of prey animals. Territorial marking behavior includes scent deposits and claw marks on trees, establishing boundaries that healthy predators typically respect during normal conditions. The encounter occurred at an observation blind positioned 40 feet from the waterhole's edge, constructed of natural materials to blend with the surrounding environment and minimize disturbance to wildlife. Blake and Nomsa extended their session 30 minutes past the established curfew to observe evening bird activity around the water source, hoping to spot rare species that only appeared during twilight hours. The predator approached the water source along a well-used game trail, favoring its infected paw that showed visible swelling and discharge. Blake focused his binoculars on the approaching animal while Nomsa prepared to record their observations in her field journal. The 120-pound cat spotted their movement from 25 feet away, immediately crouched into hunting position, recognizing potential prey despite their concealed location. Its infected paw was clearly visible, showing the that had compromised its normal hunting ability and forced it to seek easier targets. Blake's movement with the binoculars caught the predator's attention as the light meter on Nomsa's small camera fired automatically, creating a bright burst that triggered the predator's attack response instincts. The injured animal bounded over their observation equipment, a single powerful leap, covering the din under 2 seconds with remarkable speed. Despite its injury, powerful jaws clamped on Blake's throat with force, severing major blood vessels and crushing cervical vertebrae within seconds before releasing him. Blake collapsed immediately as the predator turned toward Nomsa, who had grabbed her metal thermal defensive weapon. The animal's 120-pound weight knocked her backward into muddy water at the pond's edge. The impact drove her underwater briefly before she surfaced, gasping for air and struggling to footing in the slippery. The predator seized her by the shoulder and attempted to drag her toward nearby, but her struggles in the shallow water caused it to readjust its grip to her throat, delivering a fatal bite. Following typical feeding behavior, the predator began consuming accessible on Blake, before returning to Nomsa. Both victims minutes from massive blood loss and trauma to vital areas. Lodge security the missing vehicle when it failed to return for evening roll call 7:30 p.m. Established safety protocols. Search teams departed immediately using spotlight-equipped vehicles and left the waterhole after 90 minutes of searching. When rescue teams arrived, found both victims died from massive blood loss and throat trauma caused by the predator attack. The deaths were ruled accidental due to violation of established curfew protocols.